Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with the Youth Action Council in Shasta County. Today we're at the Veterans Hall building, one of the various polling locations here in Reading, and we're going to try and interview anyone and see what they have to say about the voting process in this location.
All right, thank you. Now, could you just spell your name just so we make sure?
Kehoe, K-E-H-O-E, first name David.
Okay, thank you. Is there any organizations that you're affiliated with that you'd like to be mentioned?
No, quite a few, but
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, well, thank you. That's all.
All right, so this is David Kehoe. You said you're here to vote today at the
Yes,
Veterans
sir.
Hall in Reading. All right, just some questions for you about your just idea about voting. Why do you think voting is important?
Because the government belongs to us, and we each want to have an opinion as to how the government runs. And if we don't participate in the voting process, then we will let others make that decision for us. And that's not the best way for our government to be run.
All right. What resources do you use most often to educate yourself on matters of politics, what you're voting on, where you get your information from, and where do you think people should?
Well, I think there's several avenues that individual voters can explore. One is to read all the material that is sent to us by the registrar of voters. Two is to digest all the material that the various candidates have to offer us. And number three is to talk to people that are running for office and get their views on how they can make a significant contribution to the betterment of the community. So there are three areas. And also, number four is you can talk to other people and find out what their idea is. You know, there's much more involved than just coming down here on the day of the election and voting. If you're a conscientious citizen, you have to do all that background information.
Okay. You mentioned personally interacting with the various people we're voting for, getting to know them. How
Yes.
important do you think for the audience? How important is getting to know who you're voting for personally at the local county level?
It's imperative.
Imperative. Why?
It is. Because when I cast a vote, I want to have an idea on what the philosophy of government is of that particular individual. How are they going to serve as good stewards of the public treasury? And you only get that by talking to folks and asking them how they intend to legislate. It was my good fortune and honor to serve on the Reading City Council for 7 years. I served on the Board of Supervisors for 20 years. I always welcomed hearing from people and what they had to say, because I will tell you that over the years, I found that government can be very intimidating for people. And folks need someone in government, an elected official, that will help them solve their problems or provide them with information. So that's why you need to know what the individual candidates have to say.
Do you have any insight you could offer for younger viewers, high school students, into the political process?
Yes, I do. Number one, become informed. Number two, become a participant in the political process. You can do that in several ways. You can come down here and volunteer to be a poll worker. Three, get to know your candidates and decide for yourselves how you as an individual want to participate in the political process. It's extremely important that each one of us in this room participate at some level. And so that's why I think it's so significant that all of you folks are here today learning about the process, asking questions. And on that matter, please never feel intimidated by asking questions. I want you to remember one thing. People that are elected to public office, they work for you. They're responsible to you. It's not the other way around. It's imperative that we do that.
And one more thing.
Sure.
For people under the age of 18, what would you say is the number one biggest thing for youth today to pay attention to, like, politics in their local community?
Well, I think participation is number one. Number two is finding how government works. Now, you all probably in your education learn about basic elements of government. But by attending, let's say, local government, by attending city council meetings, by attending board of supervisors meetings, don't hesitate to introduce yourselves to those that are in public office. Don't hesitate to do that. Learn as much as you can. And then you folks will develop the self-confidence that in, let's pick a number, 10 years, you may decide to run for office. And you're going to do a hell of a job. Because the fact that you're here today wanting to learn about government is indicative of good citizenship. Okay?
Okay. This is David Kehoe, and I thank you for your participation. Hello, I'm Jerry Miles. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
I'm Wendy Dickens.
Today we're going to just be asking you some general questions about your opinions about today's election. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so to start with, why do you think voting is important in our local elections?
It is going to make decisions for you as a community member, as a community as a whole. And so if you really are invested in what's going on in your community or have any opinions about what's going on in your community, voting is the best way to make sure people understand and know about those particular opinions using your vote.
All right. Are there any particular propositions that you'll be voting on or that other people will be voting on today that you feel particularly strong about?
I think there are several. I think some of them have to do with positions within the community. So voting around who you feel would be the best people to run in our, on our board of supervisors or in our city council is really imperative. But also I think, if you're thinking about taxes and what needs to happen around some of the other pieces statewide, the flavor ban is an important topic for me personally, just because I feel like there's some targeting that happens for youth around vaping and flavored tobaccos, and that one addresses that very nicely.
Going back into that one, what about that proposition? Like, how would it affect your life personally based on the outcome of that proposition?
Well, personally, it will affect the organization for which I work in. However, it will also assure that my own teenagers aren't drawn toward possibly utilizing vaping as a tool for, other things that they could be doing. So,
all right. And a different question. Do you feel your personal political beliefs are represented in our community?
I think they are, depending on what we're talking about. So I think when it comes to voting, people have very polarized opinions at times, but also there are people who kind of lie in the middle, and I really look at what is going to be in the best interest of the community, what's going to be in the best interest of me moving forward as a community partner and member, and what's going to be the best for my children as they grow older, and how is that going to impact them. So I think one of the things is really recognizing for me what is going to be the best for the future. So I'm probably one of those voters that's in the middle a lot of times, and can vote based on what I think is in the best interest as opposed to specific party divisions.
All right. And just for the audience, what resources did you use to educate yourself on the matters that are being voted on today, and would you recommend such resources for others?
So I used a variety of resources. I think, you can use what comes in the mail through the voter packaging. Again, remembering that a lot of those are paid statements through candidates. But the ones around the propositions often tell you the pros and the cons, or the benefits or the deficits within each of those. But you also have the ability to watch any debates that are going on, and those are really helpful to you because some of the pointed questions that you might have burning in your own mind really can be answered during that time, and it often is, just a different way to look at things. I also look up, information about the propositions on the internet to assure that I'm getting a rounded version of what the pros and the cons and the benefits and the non-benefits are.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about voter fraud? Do you think this is an issue? And if so, what are ways to prevent it?
I don't have serious concerns about voter fraud. I do think that there are mechanisms put in place to assure that people are not attempting to vote more than once. I know that the office of the voter clerk, they do a good job of checking on assuring that people are registered voters, and then that they've only voted once. So I think that the checks and balance for voters is appropriate and should be maintained, and definitely want to be checking those things. But whether or not people can commit fraud, they could probably try, but I think it would be caught, I guess.
Okay, and a final question. What do you think is the most important reason for youth, like those under 18 who can't vote yet, to pay attention to local politics and just the general political atmosphere?
I think it's really important for youth to start paying attention so they can become better consumers of the community. And what I mean by that is that they're going to become better not in knowledge around what does it mean to be a voter? Why does it affect you locally? I think sometimes we think our votes aren't important, but as you grow older, you realize that local voting is specifically important to you and how it's going to affect your life. And if you can get involved and begin to understand the political process earlier on in the process, you're going to do better as a voter because you're going to have a better perspective on how to make decisions around voting.
All right, that was all our questions for now. Thank you, Wendy Dickens, for your time, and I appreciate it. Is there anything you would like to have a final statement?
I think just vote. Vote because it does make a difference.
Right. Thank you. Okay, Alita, as the communications coordinator for tobacco education, what is your view on Proposition 31, which seeks to ban flavored tobacco products?
Vote for it, first and foremost. The legislature passed this bill. The governor signed the bill. And so what happened is the tobacco companies, of course, are fighting it because they want all of you young people to become as addicted as many of your parents and grandparents have been. The tobacco companies have poured thousands, millions of dollars into this. This is a proposition that now that it's on the ballot, it can't become law unless we the people, we the voters, vote for it. Vote for Proposition 31.
And how do you think this proposition will impact the lives of high school students today?
Well, obviously it's going to make flavored tobacco products illegal, and they just won't be available. You cannot purchase them if this goes into effect in California.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Options Shasta, and this is Albert Sanchez. I'm just going to ask you some general questions
Sure.
to help inform the audience. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right. Question 1. Why do you think voting is important?
Oh, I think it's important because we want to get we want the person that is going to be in office to represent us and our ideas and our beliefs and what we want done. So if you sit at home and you don't go out and vote, then you're letting other people project and get the person that they want in the office, and it may not be the best person that you feel should be in that office.
All right. Have you voted yet this year?
Yes.
Okay. Like in our local elections,
Yes.
what proposition do you feel strongest about and why?
I didn't vote in. I voted no on all the propositions
Okay.
because I didn't believe that they are there to do what I would want them to do.
Any particular example you'd like to tell the audience?
Not right offhand.
Copy that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think your political beliefs and ideals are represented in your local community?
I think for the most part, yes. And there's other parts where I think, so I've been in cities that were like Shasta County, and then they started growing and increasing, and there are more people coming in. And I think Shasta County right now is going through growing pains, basically, to put it.
How might that affect the audience, which we're mostly aiming for high school students? How will that affect their lives?
I think there's going to be changes here that weren't here before, and there are people that are entrenched in what Shasta County was in the past, and I think that those ideas, while they were good and they worked at that time, I don't think they work today. And I think for younger people, they need to get out there and vote and let the elected officials know that they're an active force to be dealt with.
All right. To help inform the audience, what do you think are some good resources to learn more about politics, about local leaders, and just voting in general?
I think in general you can go on to, I think the research that you do can't just be based on the flyer you receive. It can't be based on the 30-second blip you get on the television. You need to go further. You need to go online, go into the Secretary of State office, go into the legislature, go look at the bills that are coming up, look at the propositions that are coming up, read the proposition. I know it's boring. I've done it. It's boring to read these propositions from point A to point B. But there are things in there that you think you're voting for one thing, and underlying things, there's stuff that's you're voting for that you didn't know you were voting for. There's this, it's a term, it's called pork. And I don't know if you guys have heard it or not, but in order to get something through the legislature, they talk to other legislatures and they say, okay, I'll vote for your thing if you vote for my thing, or if you put this in there, then I'll vote for that. And you don't hear about that. I personally think that should be outlawed, but it's politics.
Well, more about background politics. What do you think are things that the youth of today should focus on when learning about politics? What are things they should be paying attention to in particular?
Unfortunately, a lot of it is things that you're going to have to go back and research, because you're not going to hear it from a politician. You're not going to hear that, I'm behind this bill, and they're not going to tell you, but there's this other pork that got into there too, so we have to get that in there, and they're not going to tell you that it's going to cost you X amount of money. It just doesn't come. It's not to their advantage to do that. And I think, young people, you need to educate yourself in that field of politics in order to be an educated voter. There's a difference between being a voter and an educated voter. And yes, it's boring and it's laborious, but I think you can do that.
All right. Thanks, Albert. Is there anything else, final statements you'd like to tell the audience?
Just to me is you really need to educate yourself and not just listen to these offhanded comments. And there's a lot of people out there that want to influence the vote. When you go in to vote, it's private. No one needs to know who you voted for, and you don't need to tell them. And you study it, analyze it, and make an educated decision.
All right. Thank you,
All right.
Albert.
Thank you.
Michael Johnson,
I'm correct.
Shasta County Sheriff.
Shasta County Sheriff Coroner, correct. MICHAELJOHNSON.
Okay, are we ready to start?
All right. Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with Shasta Youth Options. This is Michael Johnson, Shasta County Sheriff. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Michael Johnson. I am the Shasta County Sheriff Coroner. I was appointed in August of 2021 and recently won the primary election, so I have a 6-year term coming up.
All right, thank you. We're just going to ask you some general questions, get to know you, get to know your opinions, that sort of thing.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so question 1. Just a weird one. How do you think the rain will affect voter turnout today?
Well, interestingly enough, I think it's going to affect voter turnout in the negative. I actually did a little research on that this morning, and weather plays a factor on whether people actually show up to the poll and vote or not. So obviously your mail-in ballots it's not going to affect, right? But we're talking about the polls, and when people choose to go to the poll, sometimes the cold or the wet weather will affect whether in the long run they do it or not. And I'll give you an example. The other factor with the weather today is the time change. So now not only is it cold and wet outside in a different environment for them to get out of their cars and go to vote, but the people who wait till vote after work at the end of the day, since the time change, it's going to be darker. And so now you have dark in conjunction with wet, nasty weather. I think it's going to negatively impact the voting.
All right. And for the audience, tell us about how you got involved in law enforcement and how you eventually ended up being the sheriff today.
Wow, okay. It's kind of a long story, but I actually I went to Humboldt State University. I got a degree in wildlife management, a biology degree. I was going to be a fish and game warden. That's the path I chose. And I tested for the state and was waiting to get assigned to a position. And it's a long process when you wait for the state. And I was poor because I just came out of college and I needed a job. So while I was waiting, I took a job with the Eureka Police Department as a patrol officer. And it just turned out that I was pretty good at being a police officer and I liked it. So I withdrew from the state for fish and game and I stayed in law enforcement. And that started my law enforcement career. Went on to the FBI Academy, and then I was got a job as a chief of police in a little prison city of Ione, which is Amador County. And then I came to the county of Shasta as the Anderson police chief, and I was there for 10 years. And now here I am as your sheriff.
All right. Thanks. So, we're hoping this video will get to like the attention of various high school students and youth across the country, county, whatnot. For them, why do you think voting is important?
Well, first of all, it's a huge deal because it's a privilege as one of our freedoms in this country, and a responsibility, I think, of everybody to participate and choose who represents us as the people the best. And I'll tell you, one of the things I've always said, and my father said to me when I was young, that if I didn't participate and I didn't speak up and at least make my choice, then I forfeited my right to complain about it. So if you don't like something that's going on and all you do is complain about it and you don't participate in the process and try to change that process, which in this case, for what we're talking about, is your vote, then you should sit by the sidelines and keep your mouth shut because you're not participating in the democracy that we're so lucky to have in this country.
Right? Have you voted yet today?
I have.
Of the matters being discussed this year, what proposition do you feel strongest about?
Don't think I care to say on that one.
Okay. For a general audience, how do you think the propositions being discussed this year might affect their lives and yours?
How the what?
How, like, for the general audience, how do you think the propositions being discussed today and like across the various ones might affect people's lives as individuals?
Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't matter what the election is. Those propositions always affect your life, and they always will bring about a change in legislation and ultimately day-to-day impacts on everybody's lives. So, for instance, if you just take the gaming propositions that are out there and being voted on, depending on which way they go, it's going to affect how law enforcement deals with certain violations of the law or not, how youth are impacted and the ability they may have to participate in gaming and online gaming and different things. That depending on how that law goes is depending on the direction then the further laws, the criminal laws go, and determines also the direction on where you are impacted personally. Does that make sense? So if it goes one way, maybe it doesn't affect you too much at all. Maybe it doesn't change your ability to participate in it as a youth or as an 18-year-old. But if it goes the other way, maybe all of a sudden you're able to bet online, gamble online, and those monies flow in a different direction than they are used to. And now you see different programs come out or be cut depending on which way the propositions go.
All right. How have you seen election laws change in recent years?
Well, I haven't seen a huge change in election laws, mostly because that's not the world I live in, and so they've been minor as far as my observation goes. Now, there's some pushes for some major changes to the election laws that are out there by different people because of their opinions of how the voting is tallied and machines counting votes versus in-person voting. So there's a lot on the table now, which are pretty profound. But in my lifetime, I haven't seen anything that's drastic that sticks out to me.
All right. And in your unique position as Shasta County Sheriff, what sorts of actions do you take to help ensure voter safety and things along those lines in our community?
Yeah, so as a sheriff, we take a pretty active role in that, in protecting voter safety, not just the voters that are coming to the polls, but actually the people that are working the polls as well. So our job is the safety of everybody, right? It doesn't matter who you are, your race, color, gender, your position in the government or population. Safety is what we're here for. So what we do at each of the polling sites is we have a plan with our allied agencies and work in cooperation. For instance, if you take just across the street here at the clerk's office where the votes are dropped off and tallied, we will have 2 deputies inside the building for their protection throughout the night, and in conjunction with Reading Police Department, since this is their jurisdiction, they will take the outside of that. And now we're not just talking uniformed officers standing around. We both also have personnel that are plainclothes and undercover and roaming around in different vehicles and different avenues to ensure the safety of everybody. So it's pretty detailed and it's pretty in depth when you talk about all the voting polling stations across the county. So we have a lot to cover and a lot to do, and it takes a lot of personnel, but we stay alert with that. And that's just, and I'm just talking to you about election day. There's a lot that goes into it prior to getting to today too. There's several correspondence with local, state, and federal agencies where we receive tips about what may or may not be going on, things to look for at these polling stations, and how to keep them safe.
How do you think voter safety might vary geographically, across our area, say urban versus rural, voting districts, things like that?
Yeah, it varies hugely. It's a big difference to what geographic region you're in across the United States. Now, if you take just the basic, a rural county like Shasta County would be considered versus a heavily populated metropolitan type of area, the differences are just night and day. The threats to public safety, the possible discriminations that go on, the unfair treatment of certain people, intimidation, much higher in your city type of environments they are in your rural areas. And also you look at demographics of what you have for conservative areas versus not conservative areas. Those things change the dynamics of those, the safety that's involved in those pollings as well.
Okay, different question. So, what resources do you use to educate yourself on voting matters, and what resources would you recommend for others?
Well, for me, it's almost a lot of it is just by nature of my job. Being the sheriff can be a very political job, and so I'm exposed to a lot of it. And I get once a quarter the California State Sheriff. So there's 58 counties in California. All 58 sheriffs meet quarterly, and part of our meeting, well, actually a full day, is dedicated to the different assembly bills and Senate bills and politics that are involved with the state. So I get a big education there in learning about what's going on in the state and how things are being moved through. The lobbyists that are involved come to our state sheriff's meetings. So that's where I get a lot of my education. Prior to being a sheriff, I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of researching online, both in traditional, you guys may not know this, but there used to be things called books that we would read, and I'd get a lot of that information there and talking to people that are involved. So what I would tell somebody that wanted to get educated about whether it's an assembly bill or a person running is to just do your homework. And when I say do your homework, I don't mean just go ask the same circle of friends or people that you're generally around what their opinion is or discussing a topic with them, but get outside your comfort zone and approach some of the other people who have exact opposite thoughts of you or different views or a different political party. And that way you get both pros and cons, and you're able to arrive at a more sound decision yourself than just sticking to that circle of people that is in your comfort zone.
Okay, and to my understanding, so contrary to other law enforcement positions, the sheriff is an elected position, correct?
That's correct.
Could you tell us more about that process in becoming a sheriff and how people attain information about who they would like to vote for?
Yeah, well, this was the first time I've ever run for office. It was new to me, and it was certainly an eye-opener. It can be nasty, it can be dirty, and it's definitely, speaking of stepping out of your comfort zone, you get put out of your comfort zone. So the process goes like this. So I want to run for sheriff, and so there's certain parameters I have to meet, or certain criteria I have to meet to be even able to apply to run for sheriff. So those are years of experience in law enforcement and certification and education, and all those are check marks they hit. So once you find out that you meet the qualifications to run for the particular office that you want, and we'll just talk about the sheriff, then you have to file with the clerk's, the registrar's office, and file your paperwork and pay a fee. And once you file and pay a fee, then it becomes a process where you have to go out and get a basic amount of signatures that people that will support you running, which isn't a lot, but it's just to support your application process. And then comes the election, or the campaign up until the election. And when you campaign, you have a campaign committee. You pick a committee of people who are a balance of the community. At least I did. That's the approach I took. So I tried to take, just like I told you about educating myself about voting, I tried to pick people that were not all like-minded and that represented different factions in the community. Somebody from business, somebody from education, somebody from politics, somebody from media. So I cover a vast array of the community is represented. And then it's going out and going to a lot of public forums, a lot of speaking engagements, to special interest groups, to schools and everybody, and basically telling people what your philosophy is. And the key to me was to be genuine in who I was, and not to make promises that I couldn't keep, and not to try to win votes just based on what I was saying. In other words, I didn't change my opinion or who I was when I was campaigning, because I didn't want it to be not genuine. I wanted people to know what you see is what you get. This is what I want to do to represent people, and this is how I'm going to go about it. And then of course it goes down to the day of the vote in the election, and you find out where you come out and all that.
Okay, and a follow-up for that. What do you think is the most important factor for people when it comes to determining who will be their sheriff?
Yeah, well, I think that's all over the map. I think a lot of that's determined on how involved and in tune you are with your community and with your law enforcement agency. So in this case, the sheriff's office. How educated you are, how really sincere you are about learning about the person that is running for sheriff and learning about what the sheriff's agency does for the community. There's a lot of factors involved in what some people pick a sheriff based on simply do you support the Constitution or don't you? And some people pick it on, well, my group of friends likes this guy and you're not that guy, so that's who I'm going to go with. So there's a number of different, some of it is just name recognition. A lot of people are voting and have things that are very near and dear to them that are on the ballot, like a assembly bill or a proposition or something that's on there, but they don't know about the candidates, so they go off of, oh man, I've seen his name several times before, so they check that box. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but I think the most important one is the people who are really looking out for the best interest of the entire community. And when I say the entire community, I mean entire Shasta County, and looking for the person that will best represent all of those people.
Okay, and for the audience today, what do you think, for youth in particular, is the most important factors that they should pay attention to in local politics and elections?
Just what I told you. What they should pay attention to is who they think is going to represent everybody fairly and equally. The other factor with that I think people should pay attention to is look at candidates for their experience and what they've done. So you'll see several candidates pop up if you start digging into it who haven't been involved with much in the community, and all of a sudden they want to hold the office, they say, to represent everybody, but when they've never been very participative in the community at all. And when I say participate in the community, it could be anything from sit on the board of Youth Options, or they're involved in their local Rotary or Elks Club, or they're volunteering as a coach and at the high school, anything to show that they've had involvement in the community, opposed to just all of a sudden coming up because they're passionate about one issue.
All right, and for a final question, is there anything you'd like to say about yourself, your role as sheriff, or just voting in general, politics, that you think people should know?
Yeah, I would say what we said at the beginning. You know what? Get out and vote. Educate yourself before, and get out and vote, and don't leave it to chance. And it's a great privilege to be able to vote. And also, you hear the argument of every vote matters. That is very true. If you think your vote doesn't matter, it does matter. In fact, when my wife and I disagree on something and we're going to vote different ways on something, it matters very much to me because I cancel out her vote. And so if you want to look at it on a micro level like that, it does impact the outcome in the long run. So please get involved, understand the issues, understand the people involved, and cast your vote.
All right, thank you. So, I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Options Shasta, and this is Michael Johnson, Shasta County Sheriff. Thank you very much for helping us today.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Options Shasta, and this is Aaron Resner. Aaron, I understand you're running for Shasta County Board Supervisor for District 1, is that correct?
Yes, I'm a current member of the Reading City Council until December, and then I'm also running for County Supervisor for District 1.
All right, is there any other introduction you'd like to give to the audience for tonight?
Purely just that I'm a local business owner. My husband and I own Dutch Bros Coffee here in town, and mom, and a board member of a few nonprofits, because I think that giving back is really important.
All right, Aaron, we're going to ask you some general questions about you and your opinions on this year's voting process.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
First question, well, what motivated you to run for public office?
I really care about, so my husband and I have given back in other ways in terms of nonprofit or donating, volunteering, because I think that if you have the ability to help, that you should. And I deeply care about my community. We have 4 children, and I grew up here, went away for college, and then came back, and I really am proud of where I came from, and I want my children to be really proud of where it is that they are from when they go away and come back.
All right, next question. How has your career as a public servant influenced your opinion on the voting process this year?
I think that I'm more thankful for those who work at the polls. I would say this round than I have historically. I think that I've always really appreciated them and thought that that sounded like a fun task, but in the last few elections, especially this year, I assume that it's less fun than it probably was when they initially got into it. So I'm really thankful for all of the time that they put in there.
All right. What proposition do you feel strongest about this year?
Oh man. I think that it is a bummer. I would say overall, I think that it is a bummer in regards to propositions that sometimes we vote yes or no solely because the proposition wasn't correctly structured or it wasn't the best in terms of financial structure and limitations or earmarking, for instance. Those sort of things. Like I would have preferred that proposition around arts was clear for the general public of what that looks like specifically, where those dollars can specifically be used and where they cannot be used. I think that the proposition process is actually really confusing to most voters.
With the specific proposition on arts funding, what do you think you could have, or what would you have done if you had the power to like restructure, rephrase that proposition?
I would have earmarked it for specific things. For instance, things that are like this, that are media related or theater, things like art and that, so that it was very clear. Maybe dance, those sort of, I would have outlined specifically that this is what it's allowed to be used for, and made it, I would have created this financial structure so that you could not use that for anything else. Usually we call that like earmarking.
All right. Okay. Larger question. One of the key focuses of your campaign listed on your website is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And Measure A lists that the city and city clerk and treasurer positions would be changed into appointed positions, rather than ones voted on. How do you feel about that proposition?
So this year during the primary, it was discussed because it was probably the first, at the county level, the first time in which that there were people running for certain positions that are elected positions who didn't have a work history or qualifications to do that specific job. When you think of something like the treasurer, it's really important that the treasurer doesn't, and that the city clerk are independent and that they don't answer to anybody specifically. However, it's really also important that those people are educated in the field. It would be very scary to have somebody who didn't have a CPA background managing millions and millions of dollars for the entire city. So that was why the city council and city staff felt like that it was a good time to ask the general population, would you like to see that be an appointed position, or would you like to see that continue as an elected position?
Okay, for our audience, could you tell us more about what a CPA qualification is? Because this is intended for high school students and the like.
A CPA is a certified public accountant. So, a CPA would be somebody who has a background and a degree in finance and financial structure. So they are somebody whose educational background specifically matches the job in which that they would be taking on.
My understanding of your response is that you would be against making it an appointed position because that would allow people to select people who aren't qualified?
So appointed, they would be appointed by the city council and by city staff, similar to. So that would mean that somebody who interviewed for that position, the city manager would make a recommendation, and then the city council in itself would vote on whether or not that person would be the treasurer or the clerk. The other option is that they would be picked to do that position, and to the best of my knowledge, I believe that you only have to be 18 in order to be the city clerk, to qualify. Those are the qualifications: to be 18 and registered to vote and live within the city of Reading. And in that case, if you voted in that sort of way, you would, the people would continue to elect that person.
So you feel the board should appoint the position so that they can ensure
I didn't actually say which one I liked. I just told you both of the options.
I'm asking what you like.
Okay. I think that I would, in this situation, I would likely move into an appointing. That's my personal preference, solely for the fact of I think that it could be really, really dangerous.
All right, ensuring the merit of the who's representing you. That's fair. Okay, next question. What challenges have you faced in public office or running for office?
I think two things are really interesting. One, I don't think that in a local election that you are as prepared for how nasty things might be, or the really difficult things or untrue things that are said about you. I think that you're not as prepared to defend yourself, especially if you have historically been somebody who has a really good reputation and made good choices in life. I think you're not really prepared for that, or prepared for there to be lies shared about you or your family or your team. And then I think that it's really interesting. It's really interesting to be a female in this space, because specifically because women walk this fine line between appearing strong and appearing, I'll just say, like a witch. That oftentimes there's this for a man coming across as very strong, it's an admirable sort of thing, or being very direct, it's often very admirable, but the way in which that a woman delivers it is not always received exactly the same. So it is a very interesting mix.
Have you had any particular experiences that that happened to you, lies made about you, things like that?
Oh yeah, there have been lots of that over the last year. There have been lots of those things over the last year, and lots of comments in regards to my general appearance or beauty based on whether or not I could execute a job, which is an interesting thing because I don't think that my opponent received any of that, being that he's male.
All right. A more specific question. You said you own Dutch Bros and have similar business interests. If there are any conflicts, in politics, things that related to your business interests, how would you plan on handling those if a general politics got contradicted, what people wanted contradict your interests as a business owner? How would you handle that in our community?
So during my time on council, I'll use the example of that my husband and I own property in the downtown core. So legally, we are required, as well as I think morally required, to recuse ourselves from certain things in which that there is a financial interest. So owning property within the downtown core, anytime that the city of Reading has updated the downtown specific plan or voted on something that specifically had to do with or was within roughly 500 feet of our property ownerships within downtown, I recuse myself from those topics, because sometimes that's just solely for appearance, because I think that matters. The appearance of honesty matters, and the appearance of discretion, as well as making sure that we don't have any there are no financial conflicts.
And for the audience, could you explain the significance of recusing yourself?
The thing that is difficult there, and I'll refer back to the downtown specific plan, there are two current members of the city council, at least for the next month. There are two current members of the city council that own property in downtown. So when we vote on matters of downtown specific plan, 2 out of the 5 recuse themselves. In order to have a majority, you need to have 3 yes votes. So what that looks like is that it means that all 3 council members who are still left are required to be in unison for anything to move forward. So whatever direction that is. And that actually presented some real difficulties in this last round of approving the downtown specific plan, because they weren't in unison. And so it actually delayed the approval of the project roughly, or of the plan, probably 2 or 3 months, because they had multiple meetings attempting to find some sort of common ground so that they could, all 3 of them, vote yes on something and move forward.
Okay. And second final question, is there anything you think the youth of today, people under 18 who'll be voting in the future, should know about you, about the voting process and political process in general? Anything you'd like to share for the audience?
I think it's really important that people do their research. sites like Ballotopia, or asking people who you feel like you trust and have done the research is important, and then looking up and reading all of those things. So reading about the candidates, reading ballot measures, asking questions, emailing or sending direct messages to various different I was gonna say clients, but candidates. Ask the questions that matter to you, and I think that it's really important. In 2012, it's really important to note that your vote actually matters, especially at the local level. In 2012, 11 votes determined who it was who sat on city council. So that's one of the greatest examples in recent history in the city of Reading, that every single vote really does matter. And I think that it's really important that we show up, and that we vote, and that we take time to research and ask the questions that matter to us.
So 11 or 12 votes can make the difference between someone you hate and someone you like. That's a good reason to show up.
And it's a really good, it's the best way for us to vocalize and to have our voices be heard, and to not let somebody else speak for us.
All right, and final question, just a general one. Is there anything you'd like to say for the audience, just that you think they should know about anything?
Probably just that your voice matters and you deserve to be heard, and please make sure that you share your thoughts and opinions, and that you are not afraid to speak up for the things that you are passionate about.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
That was Erin Resner. You're running for the Shasta County Supervisor for District 1 position. And I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Option Shasta. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're on.
Okay, I'm Jerry Miles of Youth Option Shasta, and this is Kevin Karai. You're running for the Shasta County Board Supervisor for District 1 position. Is there anything you'd like to add to introduce yourself?
Nope.
All right, we'll go straight into questions.
Great.
Okay, question 1. What motivates you to run for public office?
I think giving back. Understand that a lot of people have felt unheard in the community, and I think people should be involved in the election process, whether that is supporting a candidate financially, supporting a candidate on their campaign in some capacity, and then someone has to run. So I drew that straw to run. So here I am.
All right. How do you feel your career as a public servant has influenced your opinion on the voting process?
Well, I haven't. This is my very first foray into politics, so it's been about a year of doing this. But I think the way I've lived my life historically has been one that I've wanted to give back and help others, and that doesn't change if I'm in office or not.
All right. So, what proposition do you feel most strongly about?
Proposition in terms of the ones that we're voting on?
Yes.
I don't necessarily feel strongly about any one more so than any others.
Okay. If you had a key point you wanted to talk about, what would it be for our politics this year?
People got to get along. People have to understand that it's okay to have differences of opinions. It's okay to disagree with somebody, but you can do it respectfully. You can find common ground. There's a lot more that supports getting along than that divides us. And I think but that's lost on society. That's not just politics.
All right. So I've been told you're a former coach and mentor. Based on your history, what are your thoughts on Proposition 28, which seeks to increase funding to art and music education?
So I'm not a former coach. I still coach.
Copy that.
And I think the most important thing with any funding source is you have to look at, can you afford it? I think that gets lost. I don't think there's anything wrong with supporting music and education and sports and activity, but the money comes from somewhere. There's nothing free. So I will always support education, music, athletics, the arts, but I don't support putting that on taxpayers.
All right. What would that look like in terms of politics? How would you support it and not put it on taxpayers?
Well, I think people have to, I think when it comes to public funding or public or private funding, I think what's important is that you get behind the things privately that you want to get behind and support those things. when it comes to taxpayers' dollars, I think those taxpayers' dollars should be spent on infrastructure, roads, police, fire, things of that nature.
All right. Are there any challenges you faced running for office that you'd like to discuss?
I think some of the greatest challenges are getting people to understand who you are as a person. And the only way you really do that is you raise money and then you get ads out there. But I don't like that. I like sitting and doing things like this. I like sitting and talking, having a dialogue, understanding where somebody's coming from, hearing their opinions, listening to what concerns them. I think that's the only way you really get to know somebody. So the thing that's been the toughest for me in the process of running for office is just knowing that regardless of who wins, my opponent or myself, there's going to be thousands of people that are going to vote for my opponent or they're going to vote for me. So one of us are going to win, but that doesn't mean all of a sudden you have overwhelming support. There's a lot of people that voted against you. And what's tough is a lot of people cast votes without not knowing the candidates. And so if I could change anything, I wish that there was limits on what could be spent and there were more public interactions where the basis of politics was not you just go vote, but you actually, there's a run-up of like 10 big events where you can actually go meet the candidate, and that was more of the norm opposed to just reading online or watching a commercial, things of that nature.
So you think like getting involved like before the elections, getting to know candidates personally is an important matter in elections?
I think it's important in anything. I think if you get a job, you have to, I would encourage anybody, a young person or anybody that's even applying for a job, I think you have to flip the script and you have to interview the people you're looking to work for. You have to know what's important to them. What do they value? If someone passes away in your life, that's important to you, how are they going to rally around you? You have to look at the character of people before you, I think. You have to respect them. You have to understand that when tough times hit, because they will, who are they going to be in leading you, and who you're surrounding yourself with. So in politics, yeah, but that's not the norm. We're not going to change it, right? Politics have been around years, and it's been this way. But that's one thing I'd love to see changed, for sure.
All right, sorry, my question's phased out. Okay, next question. As our country's political atmosphere becomes more hostile, if you agree with that, what steps do you think you could take to bring people together?
Other countries?
Our country, our nation.
Oh, okay. Our country. So. Ask the question again, please.
So, as our political atmosphere becomes more divided, what are steps you think you could take to help bring people together, at least at a local level?
Yeah, I would tell people to stop watching the news and stop believing what you read. I would tell people to be engaged with one another. Like, don't let other people's formed opinions form your own opinion. You have to get to the root of the knowledge you're looking to seek. I know that's not what a media person wants to hear. You don't want to hear someone say, "Don't listen to the media." But I think too many people, there's not enough human interaction. There's not enough people sitting and talking. If you're at a bus stop, people are on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok. They're not engaged. There's no more. And I'm only 46. You guys, aren't even, 20 probably yet. But that's what's lost. That's what's lost in society. In politics, it's just getting worse.
So you think like people should come together?
Because everything's partisan. Everything's like, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? It's crazy.
So rather than just getting your information from online, you think people need to come together in their local communities to talk about what they need and want?
100%. That's how our country was founded. We're a republic. We're not a democracy. You know the difference, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In what ways do you feel this election is different from past years?
Well, I'm running. That's one thing. I'm not just a bystander talking about it. I'm running for office. So, but I think it's an echo chamber. A lot of us that are running for office or are involved, we think it's the most important thing in the world. But then you walk down the street and the average person couldn't tell you who the candidates are, what propositions are on the ballot. And that's the problem. You have, high 30s, low 40% of people actually are engaged in vote. More people need to be engaged. So how is this election different than others? I couldn't tell you, because this is the first one I've been a part of as a candidate in terms of, I was in the primary obviously in June, but more people just got to get involved. More people got to care.
All right. In your opinion, since our audience, we want to try and get more like youth and people under 18 involved in politics, what would you say is like the most important thing for youth in this, our local society, community, and abroad, I suppose? What do they need to pay attention to in politics to like be most effective?
Challenge everything.
Challenge everything.
Yeah, verify. Trust but verify. Understand when people are telling you something, if they're a reliable source, great, but still verify it for yourself. And that's just me. And I haven't always succeeded at that. But I would say I'm doing a lot better job now. When somebody tells me something, I say that's great, but then I want to verify it and make sure that what I'm being told is the truth, or is real, or are the facts, or are the numbers.
All right, and just to ask, what is like a major focus of your campaign for the audience that you feel most strongly about in general?
It's not my campaign. It's just what I do, and I think that's giving back and really trying to make opportunities for young people, trying to sow into others. There's a saying, I think it was Zig Ziglar, that said, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll inevitably get what you want. And that's pretty much paraphrased. But I really believe, I was really fortunate at a young age to have great coaches, great mentors, phenomenal people in my life that really, really sewed in. So now I try to do the same thing with my businesses and the teams I coach. It's really important. I try and help those that are trying to navigate life and help them reach their goals. That's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing. So it has nothing to do with the campaign. I like to see people succeed. I like to see people be successful. And I don't mean successful in terms of what the world would say in terms of money or fame or prestige or title. It's really about, I want to see people live their best life. I want to see people strive for something and get there. Even if they don't get there, know that they gave it everything they got. And if I can help them along that way, that's what I enjoy. So that's what I'll do if elected, and if I don't, I'll go back to doing it for my companies.
All right. If you attain the office you're trying to gain, what do you think is the first thing you could do to help forward that goal?
Man, that's a great question. The first thing is we got to get along. All the elected officials in this county have to get along, and they got to be on the same page. And that hasn't happened. And that hasn't happened probably for a really, really, really long time. There's 180,000 people in this county, ballpark, and there's a lot of different elected officials that have a voice in different facets. And I think it's really important to try and get as many people collaborating and helping one another, sharing resources when possible. And we haven't done that.
So it sounds like you think like our community needs to find common ground about what we need to work forwards on?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and just a final question. Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself, your campaign, or just anything you think youth today should know?
Yeah, well, by the time people probably watch this video, I'm not sure when you're getting it out, but the campaign will probably be close to over. Voting closes, the polls close here in about, it's almost 1:45, so in about 6 hours, roughly 6 hours, 15 minutes, the polls will close. So what I would say is get involved early, get involved often, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to go for something big. Yeah, I think that's important, and you're never too young. You're never too young to get involved. I did my very first political thing when I was a sophomore in high school. We did a walk for Measure A. Measure A was in Anderson because Anderson High School wanted to build a new gym and a pool and a wrestling room, and there was a bond. So we walked. In sophomore year in high school, we walked. That was in 1992. And that was probably one of the last political things I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
there's the phone.
Well, I guess that concludes our interview. I'm Jerry Miles. This is Kevin Cry, who's running for Shasta County Supervisor Board for District 1. And thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Appreciate you.
Take a left, right.
You can go right up these doors here. This is the traffic.
Good seeing you.
Good. I'll be there.
Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Option Shasta. This is Kathy Darling Allen, Shasta County Clerk and Registrar of Voters. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Kathy Darling Allen. I'm the Shasta County Clerk and Registrar of Voters.
I meant like in a general, anything beyond that you would like the audience to know.
Sure. I was appointed County Clerk in 2004, for election 5 times, just most recently elected for my 5th term in June, and I'm really pleased to support this effort to get kids more actively engaged in their government.
All right, Kathy, I'm just going to ask you some general questions to hear your opinion about politics, voting, not specifically, but just to get input from you. So, question 1. How would you describe your role in the voting process to the audience?
So my role is as an administrator. I oversee the maintenance of the voter file on a daily basis, and then the conduct of the election as we have elections. So that includes everything from filing candidates to preparing ballots, hiring and recruiting poll workers, training poll workers, election day process, and then of course the main part of our election, which is managing the vote by mail process.
All right, next question. Why, in your opinion, is voting important?
You know, I believe it's both a right and a responsibility of citizenship in the United States. All of us, even you, even if you're not 18 yet, you're paying taxes, right? If you put gas in your car, if you buy a soda at the corner store, you're paying taxes on that, and you should have your voice heard because you're already paying into the process, right? You're already participating in your community. Voting is a great way to petition your government and have your government hear your voice.
Okay, and in regard to your role here, what sorts of difficulties do you entail, like, in this position that you have?
Wow. That's a really big question. The last 2 years have been very challenging as an election administrator in the United States. We have had to deal with quite a lot of mis and disinformation published online. And unfortunately, a lot of folks are spending a lot of money polishing that up and presenting that in a very slick and professional way. And unfortunately, that's reduced the amount of trust that some people have in elections administration. So that's probably our biggest challenge, is trying to figure out how to counteract a problem that not only did we not create, we didn't create it, we didn't perpetrate it, but somehow we're expected to solve it. And that's definitely our largest challenge at the moment.
All right, almost a follow-up. And, like, in what ways have you found this election year to be different from others?
So, kind of in that same vein, regarding mis and disinformation, in the past, we would have voters call us and have questions about the process, and almost always we could invite them in to take a tour to see how it is we exactly process ballots and how we conduct the election. And seeing the process, seeing all the different security measures in place would usually make people feel more confident that their vote was counted. Starting in 2020, we started to have these conversations with voters who would talk to us for sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, and at the end would say, well, you know, you sound really sincere, but I don't believe you.
All right.
So that's, that's an ongoing challenge.
Yet again, kind of following that, what processes, securities are in place to maintain voter safety, security, election security, things like that?
So I think the most important thing that we do in California is, number one, is we vote on paper ballots. I hear a lot of folks who doubt the process talk about how we need to bring back paper ballots. We vote on paper ballots, and we voted on paper ballots in Shasta County since 2008. So it's kind of an interesting battle cry for them to take on. Additionally, almost every process we perform requires two people to be present. So it's what we call the rule of two. So every time we touch a ballot, every time our poll workers touch ballots, we have them do that in teams of two. When they're verifying seals, when they are sealing ballots up for transport here to the office or out to a polling place, there's always two people present.
All right. Little off topic. Some people have concerns about minority and indigenous representation in elections. Do you find that to be an issue here in Shasta County?
So when you say in elections, what do you mean as far as candidates are concerned?
Candidates, specific propositions, things along those lines. Any input you may have.
So, I think that our goal should be, ideally, to have our representatives reflect the electorate, right? So in 2013, California, the balance in California, between, the balance shifted, shall we say. Starting in 2013, there are now more Hispanic residents of California than there are white residents of California. But if you look at our legislature in Sacramento, you definitely don't see that reflected, right? And I think that is something that we are all still working towards. And I hope, and certainly that's not true in Shasta County. Obviously, everybody on the Board of Supervisors is white, right? But not everybody who lives here in Shasta County is white. So I definitely think that there's room for improvement.
All right. And aside from the security measures you've already discussed, do you think there are any concerns over voter fraud here or that the public has that aren't addressed?
Aren't addressed where?
Concerns about voter fraud in general.
So voter fraud is one of those things that gets talked about a lot in ways that aren't always accurate. But does voter fraud exist? Absolutely. Is it systemic? Is it pervasive? Absolutely not. It never has been, and it wasn't in 2020, and it isn't now. That being said, I just had last week one of the investigators from our DA's office here talking to me about some cases that we filed for folks who tried to vote more than one time in June's election. So we definitely pursue that whenever we find it. That's my obligation as the election official for the county, and it's the district attorney's obligation to investigate those crimes when it's brought to their attention. But does that mean that the system is rigged and that votes are appearing out of the thin air? No.
All right. And a final question, second final question. We're hoping this interview will come across to high school students across the county, maybe country if we're lucky. What do you think are the most important things for youth today to pay attention to in local politics and elections?
Well, I think what you want to be paying attention to are the things that matter to you, right? If climate is the issue that you think is most important, then I would expect that you and your peers would be talking to candidates about the issue. If it's the economy, if it's gas prices, whatever the issues are, I would hope that folks being y'all, high school students, would talk to your representatives about what it is that's important to you and make sure they're addressing those issues.
All right, and for a final question, is there just anything in general you think the audience should know about your position, yourself, or just politics in general?
Well, election administration didn't used to be political. That's a new thing for us in elections. We've spent the last couple of years dealing with the over-politicization, if you ask me, of the process. But the right to vote is the foundational right upon which all other rights we enjoy as Americans are based. And so it's really important, right? Having the right to vote and making sure that the vote count is accurate is extremely important.
All right. Thank you. I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Option Shasta. This is Kathy Darling. Thank you very much for your interview today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jerry Miles with Youth Option Shasta. It is currently 5:37 p.m. and this is our outro interview section. Today we'll be hearing from 3 participants in today's video project. Here's number 1. Hello, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rida Khan. I also participated in this activity today. So, yeah.
Could you tell us what your role here was today?
Today I was a co-producer, so I pretty much thought of questions to ask our interviewees and sort of set up the scene and helped with stuff like that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions about your experience. So question 1, what made you decide to partake in this video project?
Well, first things first is Skylar, our our youth options coordinator actually texted me about it and was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I thought, why not? Sounds like a cool project. But also I realized I don't really know much about our local voting process or local politics at all. And since this video really is aimed at giving youth some insight on why all of this is important and really motivating them to partake in this entire process, or at least inform themselves on it, I felt like it was really important.
Okay. Question 2. What aspect of this project were you most looking forward to, and what was the biggest highlight for you?
Definitely, I was looking forward to the interviews. What I didn't realize is that we were going to interview so many public figures, and that was really, really cool. Seeing people's insight from within the voting process, people running, it was all extremely interesting and gave me a lot of new perspectives.
All right. Question 3. How has your participation in this project influenced your perception about elections and voting?
It's definitely educated me on just how important local elections are and how much it can impact us on a community level, and I'm definitely going to be more involved in the future.
All right. Have the interviews you partook in today left you excited or cynical about politics in your local community?
I'm definitely excited. I heard from a lot of people that what they really want is just to be able to discuss their views with people and really work together and come together as a community. So,
final question. If you would say you gained anything from this experience, what would you say you gained?
That's a good question. I did learn a lot. What I would say I gained mostly is a sort of confidence that I can dig into local politics, and it's not something that's going to go completely over my head. It's not something that's too complicated for me, and I can really involve myself without worrying about any of that.
All right. Final question. Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself, your experience, or just that you think people should know?
Involve yourself in local politics. It's arguably more important than the national level when it comes to impacting your own lives. So.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thank you.